This is your brother, asarimhotep with the Lady Center for Kujichagulia. And today is Umoja, January 4th, 2026. And we have an open forum discussion. And so we have kind of narrowed the topic to what is culture. And this is something that we talk about frequently, but a recent conversation on our good brothers, the Mosi Warrior Clan channel last night. Myself and Dr. Dennis Assar Winkler, who we've interviewed on this program, so I encourage you all to visit that that interview. We had a long and deep discussion on defining what culture is, and so it inspired me to bring up these notes that I've already had in this discussion for another topic which we covered in the past. So, with that being said, we have a lot to cover. So make sure that you like and share the video, and we'll get started in just a moment. As I stated earlier, this is a continuation of a recent conversation on the Mosi Warrior Clan channel where we were discussing the ins and outs. I don't want to say this might sound wrong. It's still, excuse me, folks, I'm just doing a sound check here. Just making sure that everything is all right. If you can hear me, okay. So I'm gonna need just make sure it is low. I'm not sure how I can turn it up. Testing, testing. Let me know if is the mic still low. Please let me know in the chat. I know there's going to be a delay. Let me know if it's okay. Okay, there. Okay, appreciate it, appreciate it, appreciate it. So I do apologize. So I have to kind of start over, but that's not a problem. So I thank each and every one of you who made yourselves known in the chat thus far. And so what I was saying is that today's topic asks the question, what is culture? And this is a continuation of a conversation that myself, brother Benjamin Njai, aka Black Panther, and our good brother Sean from the Mosi Warrior Clan, and Dr. Assar or Dennis Assar Winkler. He and I were the guest on the channel, and so we were talking about the whole FBA movement, pros and cons, weaknesses of the paradigm, and potential effects in the future if we were to go along this path. And within that discussion, we had a conversation about culture, and there seemed to be some disconnect on how you define culture and what constitutes a culture. And so since this is something that we have covered, throughout the years, and I've even written text on this. I've already had, slides and stuff ready. So some of them I shared on the program last night, but today I'm going to go through uh, uh, the other slides so that we get a more complete picture. So thank you all for joining, and so I'm gonna shout out our good brother David Shaw in the building. H-Town represent. Sister Mika is in the house. Florida represent by way of Brooklyn. And we have Sister Safa. Peace to you. Don't know where exactly you reside, but shout out to the city and place in which you are currently at. And so, as time goes on and more people make themselves known, I will try to shout them out. So this is a live conversation, and so we will get started. So with that said, let me get this off of here. These slides is from a larger conversation, which we don't have time to go into today. So I'm gonna be skipping a lot of slides and just get to the relevant section where I start talking about culture. But part of my initial research into culture was trying to find out, as part of my research on the meaning of the place name Kemet, which started way back in like 1997, 1998. And within that research on trying to discover what the meaning of Kemet was, I was coming across, I had to ask myself the question of, okay, how does African people name themselves? When they name themselves, what are the criteria in which they name themselves? And then I started, when I started discovering answers for that, I went and looked back into the names that we called ourselves here in America, and to see if that matched up with the traditions from the people from who we descend from, and which I found the answer to be no. Right. So I wrote a particular text centered on the possible renaming of African Americans. And one of the sources I cited was Dr. Asa Hillier, and he has an article titled Race, Identity, Hegemony, and Education. And in that context, in that article, where he's in this particular section where he's talking about names, he states that these names, he's talking about our individual African names, were based upon our natal and cultural bonds and thousands of years of heritage. The names were based upon our collective history and creativity. Worse, we had forgotten why we named ourselves and how we came to be given alien names in the first place. Given the sacred nature of names to African people, and given the association of a name with our identity as a family, this was a tragedy of enormous proportions. Our focus on names became a barren one, a focus without the benefit of awareness of our rich cultural traditions. We were unprepared for the conversation about race, naming, and identity. We had come to a point where we as a people were named by others. Most of us had lost control of this most fundamental of human processes, the self-determining process of naming our, not asking the world who we are. And so the larger conversation really is about how culture is what determines your identity, and how you draw from the heritage, you draw from the culture, you draw from the collective mission to find a name that is representative of your people. And when we look at, for example, ADOS and, foundational Black American, this has no correlation whatsoever to the types of naming practices that we had in our past in terms of our heritage. And so this is again what prompted me to go deeper and deeper into the aspects of culture. And so with that said, I'm going to start. I believe it was 59. No, I think it was 39, maybe. We'll start there. Yep. So now we get into the heart of the lecture. And make sure that y'all like the video, and I'll keep reminding y'all when as the discussion deepens, I should say. And so the question of what is culture, as I brought up in our conversation with Dr. Asar, so there was two Asars on the panel last night, is that, in Africology, and I'm an Africologist. So in Africology, we have adopted Dr. Milana Karenga's 7 core areas of culture. So when we talk about culture, it is the synthesis and organization of these particular 7 concepts: a people's history, a people's mythology, a people's motifs, that means their artistic expressions, their ethos in terms of their values, their political organization, social organization, and economic organization. And when we look at so-called African American culture, there are some deficits in many areas that keep us from having a full-fledged culture, which I call a go culture. And I'm going to have a separate conversation about what I call go cultures, cultures, and anti-cultures, or no cultures, right? And so we have to juxtapose that with what was talked about from the great scholar Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, or Cheikh Anta Diop. And so he breaks down culture into 3 fundamental factors: the historic factor, the psychic factor, and the linguistic factor. So we see history in there, and then the psychic is the fundamental values and the inner logic, the way that a particular people think, and then of course the language. But I think Milana Karenga's is a bit more encompassing, and so this is one of the reasons why in Africology we use that as the basis when we're describing culture. And so, one book that we're going to always promote until the end of times is the late psychiatrist, psychologist, and business, entrepreneur and owner, Dr. Amos Wilson. He wrote a text that was published posthumously in 1998. I believe he passed in 1995. The Blueprint for Black Power: A Moral, Political, and Economic Imperative for the 21st Century. And so there's a whole chapter and whole section on culture, and culture as the basis of power. And, like any definition, because definitions are, of course, developed by human beings, they may be articulated, slightly differently, or there's certain nuances one definition to have that the other doesn't. So he's going through a list of source material that defines culture, and we highlight some of them here. So Horton and Hunt provide a workable answer to this question in terms of what is culture. And they state, from their life experiences, a group develops a set of rules and procedures for meeting their needs. The set of rules and procedures, together with a supporting set of ideas and values, is called a culture. So for like Milana Karenga, that would be part of your ethos, your social and political organization, right? And so they will fall under those particular categories. And so under the heading of culture being a historical and social product, Dr. Amos Wilson informs us that socially, culture patterns the ways its members perceive each other, relate to, and interact with each other. So when we're talking about culture, fundamentally, we're talking about how people relate to each other. and the inner logic and the rules that guide their relationships, right? And in what was it, 2007 or 8, I published a book called The Bacala of North America, and I address this culture thing, right? And after looking at countless sources on culture, I've come up with these 9 laws of culture. And so I state that culture is conscious of itself. Like the people know that they have a culture, and they know that it's different from some other groups' culture, right? Culture is a collective, agreed upon method of expression. So that will go into the motifs. So we know the ancient Egyptian way of expressing ideas versus the Chinese versus the Greek. Even if there's kind of overlap because of interaction, we immediately know a Yoruba, cultural motif versus an ancient Egyptian versus a Mayan versus a Greek, right? So, you know, it's agreed upon that this is our collective way of expressing ourselves. So, number 3, culture is rooted in a philosophy of purpose. This means all aspects of culture serve a purpose and is intended to develop a certain type of human being, and we'll get more into that later. Culture has a cosmology that would go under mythology for the one of the 7 areas of culture uh, as defined by Dr. Milana Karenga. And number 5, culture has its own unique language that encapsulates how that people or that population interprets reality. Number 6, culture has a social and physical has excuse me culture has social and physical institutions that maintain and nurture current and future forms of expression. Culture must forever be expanding and contracting. Number 7, the cultural elements of expression must be ritualized. Ritual keeps the history and the philosophy of a people in the collective memory. Rituals help to strengthen bonds within the community between members and their ancestors. Culture has a constituency who is somewhat conservative, and this is number 8, in nature, who are the living memory of the culture and who can reorient the culture when it begins to stray from its foundational principles. These constituencies are the living libraries that pass on history from one generation to another. So, every culture has a group of folks who are in tune with the culture and who knows the history and development of the culture, knows the meanings and the reasons why the culture exists, who are in charge with keeping that library of data and passing it on from one generation to the next, which reinforces uh, the rule number 6 or the law number 6 in terms of social and physical institutions, because you have to have a system of transmitting these ideas and values from one generation to the next. And lastly, culture has a formal rite of passage, which goes into number 8. So members of the community have clear points in time that mark one's development and maturity within that community. The rites of passage formally introduces the finer points of the culture, prepares them for adequately handle and develop power within the culture, introduces the members of the corporate community to their purpose and relationship to the opposite sex, the community, the earth, and their duties as excuse me. I don't know why this is cut off here. Um, let me see here, because this is the I uploaded the slides uh, to StreamYard. Um, so yes, so the rites of passage formally introduces the finer points of the culture, prepares them to adequately handle and develop power within the culture, introduces the members of the corporate community to their purpose and relationship to the opposite sex, the community, the earth, and their duties as parents. And finally, it provides an environment from which the individual can discover knowledge of self. Right. And so these 9 laws are uh, are essential to understanding culture. Right. And so as I and peace to Dr. Winkler, who inspired this conversation tonight, and peace to uh, Teti Ursa Ma'at Ra, and peace to Inyame Kepri, who he says culture is the patterns of learning, shared behavior, and beliefs of a particular social, ethnic, or age group. It can also be described as complex of a whole collective of human beliefs with a structured stage of civilization that can be specific to a nation or time period. Humans, in turn, use culture to adapt and transform the world they live in. Indeed. And so I gave my definition, or a tentative definition of culture. And, to really kind of understand some of the fine points, you would have to understand it within the whole text of the whole context of the text. And so I define culture as the institutionalized organization of the physical and social forces of life, so that those physical and social forces of life can aid the human person in developing one's own power of being, can provide tools that enable one to tower life's challenges. 3, encourages one to celebrate life's beauties, fertilizes one's seeds of greatness, and encourages the person to discover new satisfying dimensions for being human, right? And lastly, I want to give these, from a linguistic standpoint, just 2 examples from uh, 2 Bantu languages. And so it's real interesting, these particular words. So among the Baluba people who speak the language Chiluba of the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of the words or main word for culture that they have is called Bushi Jimuki. And of course you say it faster. So Bushi Jimuki, right? Which is culture. And you can, to say a traditional culture, you would say Bushi Jimuku Bwa Kabukulu, right? And that word Kulu is used for old and ancient, right? And so Bu is an abstract prefix. And so the root is a verb, Shijimuka, and it means to be intelligent, skillful, to have perfect knowledge, to be completely educated, to be perfectly aware of everything, to have a great culture, and B, to be developed. So when you add the abstract prefix bu to shijimuka, which it becomes bu shijimuki for culture, you're talking about the from the abstract principle of to be intelligent. So culture cultivates your intelligence. Is that which makes you um bright and knowledgeable in the world. Culture is that which makes you skillful, right? Culture is that which leads to the first meaning is is what is used to make you completely educated about the world around you and your people, etc. That's why it says to be perfectly aware of everything, and it is what develops you. So anytime you talk about a culture, you're talking about that which develops you into an intelligent, a skillful, a knowledgeable human being, right? And if you want to say civilization in Chiluba, you would say Jishi Jimuka, right? And so I found this particular definition interesting. among the Bassa language in Cameroon, and I've done, you know, a number of videos on this, and I have this published in print, um, about this word imbag. And we've done the linguistic analysis and shown that imbag is the Bassa Bantu language of Cameroon's linguistic cognate for the ancient Egyptian term, which we colloquially pronounce as ma'at. And so in the Bassa language, culture is that which ligui lead mbak or imbag. What does that mean? Ligui is the abstract, is the definite form of birth, from gue, to be born. And li is of, imbak. So for the Bassa people who use this phrasing, culture is that which gives birth to ma'at, that which gives birth to imbag. If you want to refer to the customs and traditions, you would say li ngung, which means customs and traditions, right? When they referring to the culture, they're saying that which gives birth to imbak and imbag or ma'at, which we don't have time to go in for. But I have a lecture online. If you search ma'at and imbag, it'll come up, and then you'll see all the proof that imbag and ma'at are the same. So if you understand what ma'at is, you'll understand what imbag is. And that lets you know that culture is something deeper. Like there's people think that culture is singing and dancing and what food you eat. That's not culture. Culture is that which gives birth to ma'at. And we continue. So I mentioned earlier that one of the goals of culture is to develop a certain type of human being. And if you want to determine if your people have a full-fledged culture, you need to ask yourself, what is the population's ideal type of human? And going along these lines, we have a number of texts that speak to this. So, as Dr. Amos Wilson on page 59 states, he says that culture constructs definitions, meanings, and purposes. These cultural constructs are used to proactively and reactively mold the mind, body, spirit, and behavior of the constituent members of a culture. So you have to ask yourself the question, mold the mind, body, spirit, and behavior into what? To do what? For what? We just don't accept every single thought, every single behavior, every single action as culture. Because your thoughts, your behaviors have to align with the culture to be of the culture. So while, for example, resilience is a value amongst African American people, gang banging is not our culture. Crips and Bloods don't represent African American people. The Vice Lords don't represent African American people. The Black Disciples don't represent African American people because it's not in alignment with the values of the population. Just because you do something doesn't mean that it is culture. Because if we go by the Bassa definition of culture, it is that which produces ma'at. So does gang banging culture produce ma'at? Does it make you skillful? Does it make you intelligent? These are the questions you have to ask. If it doesn't do that, if it doesn't cultivate you to be the best version of yourself, it is not culture. So what he addresses here is that culture is done on purpose. Culture isn't accidentally developed. You just don't wake up one morning and you have a culture. People sit down and design the culture. Culture has architects, right? And as Dr. Amos Wilson in Blueprint for Black Power informs us, at times cultures, societies, and various types of social organizations may be conceived as conspiracies. What is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is that which a group of people sit down and plan out particular actions, a set of moves to achieve a particular type of goal. That's what a conspiracy, people conspire to move in a certain way. And so what he's saying here is that culture is a conspiracy. So you must ask the question again. If you have culture, what is your culture conspiring to do? If your culture doesn't conspire to do anything, you have a set of maladaptive behaviors, but you don't have culture. Because culture is purposeful. He continues, as political economy, identity is an organization of interests, tastes, desires, passions, ideas, motives, values, knowledges, abilities, skills, etc. So remember that skills and abilities as defined by the Bu Shijimuka or Bu Shijimuki for culture in the Chiluba language. The pursuit, satisfaction, exercises, and realization of which helps to maintain the social power relations, social prerogatives, and the integrity of social, political, economic systems, which characterize a particular culture and its status quo. Thus, in both the commercial and non-commercial sense, an ethno-cultural group trades on its culture. Your culture is the basis of doing business in the world. And notice again, I have it highlighted in red. He is saying the organization of these interests, taste, desires. It doesn't matter that you have taste, that you have desires, that you have knowledges and abilities. If it is not organized for the political, the body politic, then it is not a culture, because all of those come together to awaken something in the person for them to fulfill their individual destinies within the context of the population, so that the population can fulfill its collective destiny and purpose. And so when I look at the naming processes of African people, and I looked at these terms that Black folks in America have used to name themselves over time, it is so outside the norm of what sovereign people in Africa do. So as Dr. Kaikosa Kajangu, in his PhD dissertation, Beyond the Colonial Gaze, Reconstructing African Wisdom Traditions, the ancestral vision is a vivid expression that describes why a particular community of memory exists. and what types of human beings it intends to deliver. It expresses the feelings that the members of that community of memory hold for their community and its place in the world. Often, this vision is the name that the community gives to itself. So think about that for a moment. The ancestral vision is encapsulated in the name that the community gives to itself. So when you say that I'm a descendant of slavery, that's how you're identifying yourself. What is the ancestral vision of being a descendant of a slave? Make it make sense. When you say that you are foundational Black American, what is the vision that the phrase encapsulates? See, this is important to know because what I was looking at doing this research is just how much we lost as a result of the enslavement Holocaust here in America. That's the question you should ask when you are studying African history. What is it that we lost as a result of our enslavement here in the United States? And this is one of the things we lost. The ancestral vision, and to define ourselves in alignment with what the ancestral vision is. So elements of group identity. Socially, culture patterns the ways its members perceive each other, relate to, and interact with each other. So when you think about how African Americans interact and relate to each other, what is our system of relating here in America? When we talk about group identity, right? You know, this is something that FBA doesn't study. ADOS doesn't study. Like, identity and culture requires deep reflective thought and a knowledge of history very deep, in language and linguistics, right? So what does he say here? Group identity exists when each member of a group, or a significant majority of them, perceives his or her membership in the group and his or her sharing of its defining characteristics, its defining values, attitudes, and behavioral tendencies as the most important of the primary defining characteristics of himself or herself as an individual. So when you ask individual African Americans, for example, what are the characteristics that define your people, and do you see yourself as a representative of those characteristics? These are the questions you have to ask. Because I can guarantee you that which makes you a people in the United States, anything that aligns with Blackness and Africanness, because of our Muslim, because of our Christian upbringing, and existing and trying to integrate and be one with white folks, all of their anti-Africanness, you're going to reject every aspect of that which you create out of your minds. Because, for example, notice that, I don't know if y'all have been paying attention in 2025 of all these people who are denouncing their membership in Greek lettered organizations. Greek lettered organizations are institutions founded by African American people to assist in various endeavors of survival, not only on the collegiate level, but the upliftment of the people in all spheres of life. But these Christians, because it is not, they're not exclusively associated with Jesus Christ, view all of these organizations and what they do as demonic. Like pledging and initiation is demonic. But if you understand African people and understand how initiation is the basis of all of our pedagogy, you would see. But recognizing this as African ways of doing things, because Christianity is so anti-African, now you have these people joining these organizations just so they can come online and denounce them. So they believe that they're doing something valiant for Jesus the Christ in Christianity. Stupidness, right? So I'll continue. So on page 309, group identity is evident when each member of a group organizes and directs his or her behavior in ways intended to maximally or primarily benefit his or her group, one or more of its members, as well as him or herself. Because culture does not, you can't go buy a culture. Culture exists in the minds of people and it shapes your behaviors. And the culture shapes your behavior to do for the people that's doing for the culture. So if that's what culture does, culture is that which makes an organism grow and develop. So if it is not of your people's own minds and things, but somebody else's, you're only develop. Like, for example, if your mind is very Eurocentric or Arab centric or Jewish centric, then any types of thoughts and behaviors that you do is only going to benefit and glorify them, because they are the standard in your world. This is why Afrocentricity was developed as a reorienting mechanism, so that your thoughts and actions align to benefit you and your people based upon your own African traditions. It teaches you how to value yourself and to be valuable to the culture. And so, Milana Karenga has done a lot of excellent work on culture over the years. And so this is, we just passed the Kwanzaa celebrations. And so there's a definitive book written by Dr. Karenga called Kwanzaa, right? And so when he's talking about identity, or Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture, right? So on the identity question, he states that for identity is the key to purpose and ultimate direction. And so this, I'll just pause right here. This reinforces the notion which I mentioned earlier, that culture is purposeful. And not only that, the name encapsulates the purpose of the people. It gives you a goal to achieve. So when you just limit yourself to skin color, that doesn't give you a goal to achieve. You're either born black or you're not. That doesn't inspire you to become someone. So simply identifying with a skin color, because that's the limitations of Eurocentric thinking, this is the end result. It stunts your creativity. It stunts your thinking abilities. But let me continue. In other words, a people's self-definition is a framework for establishing a people's purpose and the direction by which it must pursue that purpose, given its socio-historical circumstances, right? Culture as the basis of power. This coalescence, and this is Dr. Amos Wilson again from Blueprint for Black Power, This coalescence of subcultural social units is usually organized and motivated by a mutually recognized leadership or governing establishment. This establishment usually fulfills its responsibilities through the creation, issuance, and enforcement of policies. At this level of organization, a culture may be defined as a political organization. So let's go back to the 7 areas of culture as given by Dr. Milana Karenga. One of them is political organization, right? So at this level of organization, a culture may be defined as a political organization, which exercises political power in its defense, economic and social interests as a whole, and the interests of its subcultural group and individual members. Organizing is central to this whole discussion of culture. Ideology as a source of power. A source of power in fact, the ultimate base of power is the power of ideas, the power of mind, of thought, imagination, and vision, the power of symbols and the word, the power of ideation and the translation of ideation into action are manifested in a multitude of personal, social, cultural, and physical forms. And so this becomes very important because your culture and your identity and your systematic way of relating is the basis of economics. And Dr. Amos Wilson, in his text, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy, states the following: we're suffering from the absence of an economic system. Money is not a system. Money is what it is. A system involves the systematic and organized utilization of money, a systematized utilization and the distribution of money. Without the pattern, without the system, without the organization, one does not have an economy. An economy exists prior to money. See what he's saying here? Ultimately, what he's saying is that your economy is your culture. Economics and culture is the same. There were economies in the world before money was invented. We don't even have to have money to be an economized system. So ultimately, when we study an economic system, we recognize that an economic system at its base refers to the nature of the relationship between people. It's the systematic way a people choose to relate to one another that makes an economic system, not money. When we lack a systematic way of relating to each other, then we can have money and still be poor, have money and be robbed, which is what we are. So what he's saying here, economics has nothing to do with money per se. It has to do with the systematic way a people relate. It has to deal with culture. If you are suffering economically, 9 times out of 10, there's a system breakdown in the culture. Because it's not about the money. And he goes on to state something that's very important here, and I want y'all to pay attention. So on page 45 of that same text, The Falsification of African Consciousness, he asks the question, why do we suffer from this problem then? Why is the Black personality created? See, people think because they exist, that they exist for themselves and from their community solely. But that depends on the nature of the power relations of you and those that are in power. So if you are a subjugated people in a land that is not your own, you have a different type of power relation to people who that is their land. They've been on there for thousands of years and they've developed their culture and economic systems. And so the powers that be create an educational system that develops a type of human being that is to serve the power structure. So this is why we have to ask these questions about what kind of personality is created in the system. He goes on to say that I try to get across the fact that every maladjusted characteristic in the Black personality serves an economic function. Each maladjusted characteristic is not there by accident. It's not there simply because Europeans hate us. It's not there because it maintains their economic dominance. If I've got money, I can help you. But if I distrust you, I won't help you. And you may not make it. It's not the absence of money, it's the presence of mistrust. If I will not cooperate, if you cannot rely on me, then we cannot have an economic system, even though we may have money. A people must trust, be reliable, be dependable, have respect for each other if they are to develop a viable economic system. When they have those kinds of relationships, they have that kind of culture, they have a social system and they can build and they can grow economically. These are the deeper aspects of culture that you miss in these silly ass FBA conversations. Because they don't go this deep into the literature, into the knowledge of human beingness, of history. You just can't throw terms out there and say we this and this and this and stealing other people's ideas and cultures and trying to claim it for yourself. Saying that you have a culture, but you have no systematic way of relating to one another. And this is why these ADOS and Hebrew Israelite and FBA conversations are divisive. They put mistrust in the community. Even on the side where people claim to be Africans, Dr. Umar Johnson, Brother Polite, Malachi York, who was everybody, he was a Christian, Hebrew Israelite, Moor. He added everybody in the mix, right? Is these types of behaviors and characteristics that sow distrust in the community. And when there's so much distrust, you can't have a culture because you don't believe in one another. This is why every single time you talk about Black business, the first thing that these people think is that the Black business is inferior, that they're not going to get good service, that they're not going to get good quality products. If that is the overwhelming belief system, you don't have a culture, or what I call a go culture. And so, I like this this drawing here, and I put these words here. I've added those because we have all these conversations about economics, but not understanding they're putting the economic cart before the cultural horse. It's your culture that drives economy or your economics, not the other way around. And so you have to believe in yourself, trust in your people, develop social systems, ways of living, etc. And then you have to build skill sets. That's why that skill set, the skill set and abilities talked about by the Baluba people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Dr. Amos Wilson, which we cited earlier. Those abilities and skill sets. That's what your culture does. And when your culture invests in you to develop these abilities and skill sets, you now are valuable and you can help solve people's problems in your community. That's what a culture is. A culture helps to solve problems in the community, right? And so, what do I have this up here for? Well, I mentioned this in the in the conversation that Dr. Winkler and I had in terms of Black Africa and economic and cultural basis for a federated state. And I put this slide here in the original lecture just to remind folks of how important culture is to the economics, so much so that this is something even Sheikh Anta Diop recognized in trying to create the United States of Africa. So he's saying that there's an economic and cultural basis to do this, right? And you know, this goes into the whole Pan-African discussion, right? So there's a text called Wretched Kush: Ethnic Identities and Boundaries in Egypt and the Nubian Empire, or in Egypt's Nubian Empire, by Dr. Stuart Tyson Smith, who's an Egyptologist. So he states in this text, Doyle provides an even more explicit consideration of the dynamics behind native agency. He argues that while the interests of the agents of contact, in other words, resources exploited, must be considered, the character of the dominated society plays a critical role in imperial outcomes. Just like Dr. Amos Wilson would always stress about power relations, about, you know, the dominant culture that is a colonial culture over the 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 dominated culture, right? And so when they dominate you, they create values and purposes for the people who they dominate. And so their personality only exists to serve the dominating, the colonial culture or the colonial people, right? He continues, he divides conquered societies into three levels of internal complexity, and he meaning Doyle 1986, into tribal, patrimonial, and feudal. According to Doyle, a tribal society's critical lack of centralization and social differentiation makes it particularly vulnerable to aggression. And this is why Pan-Africanism exists. This is something that Pan-Africanists recognized since the beginning. That the reason, because everybody always asks, how was Africa so easy to be conquered by all these outside forces? Because everybody in Africa, I ain't gonna say everybody is in an absolute sense, but the vast majority of the people there think in terms of their little tribes. They're tribalist in Africa. And tribalism is your greatest weakness. And here we are here in the United States doing exactly what our ancestors did in terms of their weakness, their inherent weaknesses. You got the Hebrew Israelite tribes. You have the Moorish tribe. You have the Christian tribes with their many sub-tribes and denominations. You have the Islamic tribes in their many denominations. Yeah, I'm the American. I have nothing to do with Africa tribes. We have the FBA. We have the ADOS. All these different tribes who are anti-African, who keep preventing us from moving forward because they don't understand this freaking principle that everybody else in the world understands. That the more differentiation and smaller tribes you create, the weaker you become, the more easily it is for people to dominate you. Pan-Africanism is about the collection of resources. It's a particular ideology that allows people to relate to one another, to create a new systematic way of relating to one another. Right? I'll skip these. Right. And so people think, and I'll read this one because this one's very important, because people think that this whole concept like of delineation is something new. You know, if you're an African American, you're already delineated from a Jamaican or a Senegalese. But if you understand what this sister here is going to say, everything else will make sense. So, in a chapter in the article, Pan Africanism, Feminism, and Culture, Maurice Conde states the following: many people might say that we in Guadeloupe and the Caribbean at large are very far from the principles of Pan Africanism, but I don't believe we are. There is a West Indian proverb: it is only when you sweep your house that you can go out. I believe we are in the process of sweeping our houses and achieving our independence. I personally still believe on Pan-Africanism, but the idea was born in the minds of diaspora people at a time of great racial and physical oppression. While still extant, it is not as severe today as it was then. For this reason, I believe we should shift our interest to culture. We should busy ourselves by protecting our culture, making an inventory of it, and trying to see exactly what we are and what we possess. I think when we finish that inventory, we will better understand Pan-Africanism. So notice that she's well. Let me read it before I give commentary. So Du Bois, Garvey, and Nkrumah and the rest had beautiful and grandiose ideas, but they were ahead of their times. I believe it will be the role of future writers, male and female, to turn the minds of the people towards the world and to make them understand that there is a need for unity, diversity, and Pan-Africanism. If we were not allowed to be diverse and different, we cannot be unified, right? And I think there's some aspects of Pan-Africanism that she really doesn't understand, because Pan-Africanism doesn't require you to abandon your culture. And that's what it, from reading her text, this is something that appears to be the case. Like it appears that she believes that, um, with Pan Africanism, everything is just going to merge and her identity and her history was going to be erased. And that seems to be the logic of FBAers who think that, Pan Africanism means that you are going to abandon your history and things and your identity, which is far from the case, which is why I encourage everybody to read Pan-Africanist texts and quit making up stuff because you don't know how to read, right? And so uh I like this discussion here on Pan-Africanism. It says Pan-Africanism can be safely equated as an ideology that takes the Black race as one political and cultural unit, having a common history in the past and a common destiny in the future. Pan-Africanism is a Weltanschauung, whatever that means, born out of resistance to subjugation, slavery, racial domination, and that takes unity of the Black race and empowerment of the same as a way to reverse this negative trajectory. Thus, what captures the heuristic essence of Pan-Africanism is the fact that it is a struggle for self-determination of Africa. It is a struggle for Africa to be the master of its own fate and a quest for dignity as a member of mankind, endowed with all attributes of a society and self-rule. So Pan-Africanism is a sovereignty movement, right? And with that, to kind of ease the concerns of Dr. Conde here, we go back to Cheikh Anta Diop, right? And in an interview, which was recorded in Ivan Van Sertima's Great African Thinkers, Cheikh Anta Diop, journal or text, which is also repeated in the book that we saw earlier, Black Africa, an Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federated State, Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop makes a vital proposal. He says that we must reconstruct a new Afro-American cultural personality within the framework of our respective nations. Our history from the beginning of mankind, rediscovered and relived as such, will be the foundation of this new personality. So remember, he wrote a text. Let's go back to the title of the text, right? Here we go. So, Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state. And this is the expanded edition with the interviews from when in 1985 when Sheikh Anta Diop came to the United States. He was interviewed several times while he was here. And so in that text, in those interviews, he proposed the creation of a new African American culture, and not in Afro, like the African American in terms of an ethnic group, a new culture for us. What he's saying is that we need to create a new culture that everyone can adopt on the continent of Africa, and that this will be the kind of a culture franca, uh, based off of the concept of a lingua franca. And a lingua franca is simply a language that a group of people of different populations that speak different languages adopt as the central language of communication. So in East Africa, it's Kiswahili. In Cote d'Ivoire and Mali, Niger, it is French. In places like Nigeria, it is English, right? Depending on where you are in the Congo, it may be Portuguese, it may be French, but a native language, Lingala, is the lingua franca in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So what he's saying is that you create a simplified culture that is based upon the best of what continental African cultures can provide or have created, and the best of what the African diaspora. So that's what he means by American. American is the African diaspora in North, Central, and South America. Create this culture which everybody agrees to abide by when dealing with each other from other groups. Like, this is the expectation. This is the system of relating that we adopt, along with a language. And for most Pan-Africanists, they vouch for Kiswahili as the Pan-African lingua franca. Well, the Pan-African lingua franca, Kiswahili, should go with the Pan-African culture franca, whatever we call that when we develop it. But this is an idea that keeps what Dr. Conde, which is this lady right here, has in mind. Because it's not the disappearance and the merging of everything, it's the creation of a new, more viable culture that can solve the needs of today and tomorrow. And so these are the things that we have to consider, right? And so on the notion of, and this is particularly for Dr. Winkler, right? Because he asked for a survey and things of this nature. Like, this work has already been done. And so one aspect of this work was done by Dr. Wade Nobles, another great psychologist who currently resides in California as we speak, right? And so when he talks about the inventory of the characteristics that define African American people, he breaks it down into 8 cultural precepts and 9 reoccurring themes. And so we don't have time to go into each one of these, but the 8 precepts is consubstantiation, interdependence, egalitarianism, collectivism, transformation, cooperation, humanness, and synergism. The 9 reoccurring themes is spirituality, resilience, humanism, communalism, orality and verbal expressiveness, personal style and uniqueness, realness, emotional vitality, musicality, and rhythm. These are the characteristics the loosely characteristics that make African American people a people. But the point here is that all of this stuff is unorganized. That's why I say that African Americans have a unculture, because they have the elements of culture, the things that is necessary to be a culture, but it is not organized in a systematic way that all of these characteristics and protects us against outside forces. And so these are the conversations that we need to have. And this is what's missing from the discourse. And so these are just some extra things. I won't get into this again. These are slides from a different conversation. And so that's it in terms of the presentation. But hopefully what everyone gets from this conversation is that culture is not, what you eat and the music you play and dance. Culture is deeper than that. And you have to have all of this stuff in mind when you're talking about, the presence or absence of culture. So let me see if I can let me see. So peace and blessings, brother. First in, last out. Texas represent. He says, so we don't have a culture. I argue that we have an unculture. And an unculture is an unorganized culture. You have elements of culture, but because it is not systemized and organized in a way that serves the people, you don't have what I call a goal culture, right? And so a goal culture is where your values are understood, your institutions are built, your purposes are understood and known, and you systematize these to work in the benefit of the people, right? And then you have anti-cultures or no cultures, and people that embody that, in my personal opinion, are North American whites, Arabs, and Jews, because what they have developed are social and system ways of exploitation of other people, and the belief in their inhumanness. And so they're anti-culture and they're anti-human. Like they can't exist without being anti someone else. And that's problematic. But I'll have a different set of slides and show once I organize all that together. So yes, and so the name that I suggested for African American people, based upon our characteristics and our history, is the Bai and Kole. And as a matter of fact, let me do this. Since I got a little time, the latest I'll go is 8 o'clock. And so if y'all want to come on, I'm going to join the panel. Click the following link. So if you have any questions or whatnot, because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to read all these statements. So click the link at the bottom. This will allow you to come on the panel, and In a little while, we'll pin it to the top. Well, I guess I would have to be. Um, Let me see. Uh, Let me see. How do you? Oh, I have to go to the channel. So okay, there we go. So the link should be pinned at the top of the chat for those who are listening or watching from YouTube. If you're watching from Facebook, you're going to have to come to the YouTube and hit the link. I don't know if it's going to show up on. Let me see. No, yeah, my post doesn't show up on the Facebook accounts. So uh, so if you are listening from Facebook, you're going to have to come to YouTube and click the link if you want to join the conversation. So I know it's a time delay, so I'm gonna give it some time, um, and let me do this, and I'll just leave that right there. So uh, make sure just a reminder to that's right. Make sure that you hit the like button. And if you are new to the channel, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. And let me see. Um, let me see. And says some often define culture as a people's worldview articulated via seven lenses: ethos, history, myths, social organization, politics, economics, creative motifs, Karinga, seven cultural areas. I can get with that. Inyame Kepri says the major elements of culture are symbols, language, norms, values. You're gonna find commonalities in a lot of definitions. So, like for example, symbols would be under Karenga's motifs. Language would also be under motifs as well. Norms and values that would be under ethos. Artifacts would be under motifs. Right. So we gotta know what these synonyms mean. Um, so let me see. Um, I really support Asar's notion that the so-called African Americans should have or adopt an African Bantu linguistic group name. I hope to speak with him about this and lend him my support. Indeed. Um, Let me see. Let me see. And just a reminder that uh, the link in the chat is at the top if you want to join the conversation. If I don't see anyone join, I'll just end the program. So let me just continue. Um, we lost during enslavement in Americas. Exactly. Like people don't ask that question. So I don't believe that African Americans lost all of their cultures when we were enslaved here. There's thus the books Africanisms in American Culture and the Bantu Heritage uh, in the United States, right? Um, with in other texts which speak on those Africanisms which have survived here in the United States. um, and where they can be traced from, and et cetera, et cetera. So, uh, but you still have a lot of people operating thinking that we lost everything, and that we whatever vestiges of African American culture exists, that we created this from scratch with no influence from anyone else, which is just dumb, first of all, and just ahistorical. Um, because even if you believe that you created everything from scratch, you couldn't have, if you're using, for example, Europeans' religions, Middle Eastern religions, European languages, European dress and clothing, um, European ways of relationship and marriage. Like, there's a lot that you got to think about, in the context of cultural development. Um, let's see. Uh, let's see. What's this? I think she is saying the opposite, that unless we are different, there's nothing to unite. Again, I'm keeping the whole text in context. And the assumption is that if you are Pan African, that you would lose your culture, and it would be absorbed into this new Pan Africanism thing. And that's not what Pan Africanists believe. It's not a um, it's not an attempt to just merge everyone into one. So there, it's more so of a race first ideology. So we are uniting under the banner that we are Black African people, and that's the basis of the unification, right? And that we have shared historical enemies who have come in and created havoc and created, you know, um, catastrophic disharmonies all across the the continent of Africa, as well as among other people around the world. And so, if you can recognize this shared history and these shared features about yourself, that is the first leg of unifying. Then we come in with the ideas, for example, like of Shekinah in the creation of a culture that lays on top of your individual cultures. And this is something that we do regardless, right? So if you believe that like a corporate America exists, like for all of you who work in corporate America, there's a culture in corporate America. There's a way of doing things in corporate America. And in that corporate America culture lays on top of any culture that you may have when you go back home or in your neighborhood, and you navigate between the two. So the existence of a corporate environment does not erase your individual cultures when you go home. You just got to learn to speak between the two. And this is something that we do in all types of circumstances. So what they're saying is apply this logic and thing in the communities in Africa as well, because that's what you do. If I'm speaking the Yoruba language and you are speaking Tree, I can't understand you, but both of y'all may understand French. So y'all use French to communicate with each other. While I'm in Nigeria, I may not understand Hausa or Fulani language. But if everybody speaks English, English is the lingua franca for which we communicate and we do business. So what we're saying is that let a Pan-Africanist culture that we develop and a Pan-Africanist language be the medium that we communicate and do business and develop systems to support ourselves so that we can develop sovereign ways of being, so we don't have to depend on these colonial structures that are extracting our wealth and deteriorating our bodies for their benefit. He says Pan-Africanism can be thought of as sustainable Ubuntu. From an Ubuntu slant, Pan-African should encourage dialogue, teamwork, networking, and use of similarities and differences as resource assets. Indeed. Says Mr. Zainu was unartfully saying is that African Americans have no one culture, which is true. He compares his statement to the many cultures of the home country in Benin. I understood what he was trying to say, and that's not accurate at all, because you can't compare the two, because the Yoruba culture has hundreds of years in development. The Hausa culture, the Fulani culture, these are thousands of years in development. Nigeria is a recent phenomenon. It's just a land division created again by Europeans in the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference. There's no such thing as a Nigerian culture, right? Nigeria is a landmass with an invisible border that encompasses dozens and dozens of populations, ethnic groups, languages, speech communities, you know what I'm saying, and cultures. So that's not the same as what's happening over here in America. Now, what's happening here in America is that because African Americans were not provided the opportunity to sit down and organize their cultures in the early period, African Americans just adopted ideas and systems and institutions from other places and internalize those values and things. That's why the vast majority of us are Christians, and you know, with the second coming behind is Muslims, and you know, a lot of us have integrated into Eurocentric paradigms and all this other kind of stuff. So it's, you know, we have merged with other cultures, but we haven't organized the best of our traditions and values to make a singular culture here. Let me see. It says, sorry, what was your point on Afrocentricity on culture? I, I, I remember that part of the conversation, but I don't remember exactly what I was saying. But I would say that Afrocentricity, in essence, outside of its academic aspect of it, because it's Afrocentricity provides a method for doing research on African people. But on the social side of Afrocentricity, Afrocentricity requires that you do not see African people as deficient, as valuable. Whereas these other traditions try to dehumanize and devalue African people. And so when we're thinking about solutions to problems that plague African people, we first look to African people, values, language, history, customs, ingenuity for solutions to the problems. And we just don't skip over Africa and then go and see what the Jews are doing, and then go over there and see what the Europeans are doing because we believe that their ice water is colder than ours. When you do that, you don't have a culture. And that's what a lot of us have done over the years. And so even in Africa, they are falling into the trap that African Americans have been victim of in terms of integrating into white and Arab thought. And so now their thoughts are not their own. They are possessed by the spirits of desert dwellers. And so the hot desert dwellers, the Jews and the Arabs, and the cold desert dwellers of the Indo-Europeans. And so this is what we have to uh, understand, in terms of Afrocentricity. Afrocentricity makes Africa central to our being. Testing.
Jumbo Asar.
Can you hear me? Peace. Hold on. Why aren't I can hear you, but I don't see. Oh, no wonder. No, that's not it. No, let me remove. And that should be better. Okay, there we go. Peace. How you doing?
Jumbo Asar, Harry Wakumpia. It's Happy New Year to you. And
Indeed.
This is Baruti. And
hey, brother Baruti.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say to you is I appreciate the work that you do. I actually have been trying to get in touch with you. I'm not even sure if you read my message to you on email and WhatsApp from maybe a month and a half ago. I even wrote a little small essay that I contributed after the program that you did called "To Be African or Not to Be African." So I'm not sure if you got it or not, but I'm glad I could.
It's in my email. I probably have it, but I haven't checked that email since the civil rights movement, and I took WhatsApp off my phone. So the only time that I'm on WhatsApp is if I use the desktop, and I haven't been on WhatsApp, and I don't know.
Oh wow! Okay. Well, I'm glad I could contact you, and I hope to speak with you further offline. But let me ask a couple of questions, kind of a repeat of what I put in the chat. Let me first of all say that I'm in great support of your notion about why the African American community as a group, needs an African/Bantu linguistic name. I actually like the names Bankole, but also a name that you ventured forth, as I wrote in my little essay about Bukanda, though you mentioned that as a name for Africa, but I could talk about that later. But the need for that. But on today's show, particularly, I noted that the FBA movement and other such anti-African constructs attack Kwanzaa. And one of the ways they attack Kwanzaa is to say that Kwanzaa is fake, as in fake from the standpoint of being constructed in misapplication to Black people in the United States by saying Black people in the United States are not African. So why would you have an African holiday that will be constructed and applied for their celebrations? So they attack Kwanzaa from that standpoint. They attack Kiswahili from the standpoint that, oh, well, Black people in the United States only came from West Africa, so isn't Kiswahili an East African language? So you can see that it was fabulized and made up as even a language that does not apply to the descendants of these African peoples. So I wanted to ask you to delve into why those are false notions that I just brought up. And then my other question is that I wrote in the chat specifically was, and you delved into the Pan-African issue about not creating homogeneity. And you read my comment about, should encourage, dialogue and teamwork. But why is it that there's so many misconceptions that Pan-Africanism is about destroying variations in culture? Why has that been a misconception? Is that deliberate or just a misunderstanding of what it means to dialogue in interface?
I'll answer the second question first. The I argue is simply that they just haven't read the literature. And some cases, people just refuse to read the literature. And some people who do consciously misinterpret the literature, or they just don't have the ability to understand the literature. That's also a possibility. But also, we have to consider that the literature on Pan-Africanism is not part of a standard educational curriculum across Africa. There's there's very few, if any, Africana studies programs and departments in Africa where they learn about African people, the whole continent as a whole. And even if they did have that as a feature, at least on the university level, not that that information hasn't trickled down to the everyday person because they may not read or get books. And so, like, I remember um, a situation way back. I don't know what year this was, but I was having a conversation with a gentleman, a black brother who was living in Russia, and he was seeing if there was any way that I can share with him via email ebooks on African culture, history, language, and et cetera, et cetera. Because the way that Russia was set up, I don't know if it's changed since then, but this was over 15 years ago. You could not import certain texts. They would ban texts like that. So they would consciously not allow the black people to learn and understand their history and culture in Russia. So I had to, we had to communicate through secret email account, and I would have to, zip some files for him, scan some books if it was feasible, and send him books. Right. So, you have certain places where they may try to stop. There may be a governmental embargo, on the importation of Afrocentric literature and Pan-Africanist literature. And then in other cases, it's just a simple case of economics. People can't afford these books because a lot of these books are written for example, in French or in English, and they're primarily sold in the United States and in Europe. And so to order those books, there's the price increases when you're ordering books from overseas, and then the shipping into those areas. So that there's an economic in a logistical and distributional issue that has to be addressed for a lot of folks that are on the ground who don't understand this. So if they hear about it, they may just have access to the internet and the cell phone and just be getting information strictly from conversations and not the actual literature, even if the literature is online, right? But in the United States case, it's just these people are just willfully ignorant. Like it's just not that hard to pick up texts on Pan-Africanism, right? But to your first question, like it's FBA people are ahistorical, and this is what I was telling Dr. Winkler on our conversation on that other channel, on the Mostly Warrior Clans channel, is that a common characteristic. Now, you're a PhD, and you're a PhD in mathematics, right? You have a skill set that allows for you to. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Just one correction. Not a PhD. I have a master's degree in applied mathematics and architecture,
Oh,
but
I'm sorry.
but not a PhD. But I understand.
Yeah. Okay. My
Keep
bad.
going.
Well, you have an advanced degree in mathematics, and so you know how to do research, and you know how to think critically. You know how to move through source material and the like. But I have yet to come across an FBA PhD, but the vast majority of these individuals don't exist in a place that requires for them to demonstrate their arguments, right? They have a belief system and the like. So their anti-Africanness doesn't understand, like, why we call ourselves African in the first place. And so, like, what I have on the screen is just some notes in terms of the most prominent people who were enslaved in the ethnic groups and the regions from which they came. So you have like the Bay speakers of Togo and Ghana and Benin, like the Aja, Mina, Ewe, and the Fon, the Akan of Ghana and of Cote d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, the Mbundu of Angola, the Bakongo of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola, the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria, the Yoruba of southwestern Nigeria, the Mande speakers of Upper Guinea, the Wolof of Senegal and the Gambia, the Chamba of Cameroon, the Makwa or the Makua of Mozambique. It's a wide range of ethnic groups. So when these individuals came to the Americas, they didn't stay in tribal units. They all merged. And so you couldn't call them in a literal sense the Igbos, because their ancestry wasn't all from the Igbo or the Mbundu. And so the enslaved Africans simply called themselves African. And when they hold on one sec.
Well, as you're looking for
And when
information,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm saying
I
as you
found it,
were,
but go ahead.
I was thinking as you were looking for the information you have on the screen. I was just saying some of these groups are getting so off kilter now until they're saying that the slave trade never happened in terms of the transatlantic slave trade. They were already here, and so there was no need for them to be called African at all because they never were.
Yeah. It's at some point, you just gotta pick your fights, because it's just some people who, again, are willfully ignorant. And but as a researcher, one of the first things that I would have done was looked at, okay, when the people organized themselves, what is the name in which they organize? What name did they use in terms of organization, in terms of ethnicity? So you have, for example, the Free African Union Society in Rhode Island, 1780s. The Free African Society here in Philadelphia, 1787. African Free School of New York. So when they created a school, an institution, they named it the African Free School of New York, 1787. The New York African Society for Mutual Relief, 1808. Same year, the African Grand Lodge of Prince Hall Masonry. It's the first Prince Hall Lodge. They named it the African Lodge. And then in 1860, you have the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Then you have in 1827, African Benevolent Society in Ohio. You have the, I don't know why I put that there, the Baltimore Society for Relief in Case of Seizure. But you also had the African Civilization Society, founded in 1858. The African Dorcas Association, formed in New York City, 1828. The African American Female Literary Association, 1831, also here in Philadelphia. Then the African American Female Intelligence Society, established in Boston, 1832, a year later. So we have all these different organizations, and they're calling themselves African. Find me a list of organizations that say we the Black Indians of whatever. Our ancestors were clear. And they try to say that, well, we didn't call ourselves African American. We did call ourselves African American even then. So when we go back, add Sister Mika, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And so notice that in African American Female Literary is 1831, and in 1832, African American Female Intelligence Society. So when we go to this text here, this is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, in terms of print, the usage of African American. This is 1782. And the book is titled A Sermon on the Capture of Lord Cornwallis. And the author, his name is credited as an African American. That's the author's name. And he didn't give a real name. He just said an African American. And to show that he was conscious of his Africanness, in the sermon, the author addresses on page 11 of this text, my own complexion, ye who are my brethren. So he's giving an address. He's letting you know who he's speaking to. So he's saying he's addressing this text, the conversation that is to follow, to my own complexion, Black folks, ye who are my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, ye descendants of where? Africa. And here's a screenshot of the actual page in which it is on. You can find it online. And here's the section. Let's see. Like, for example, we have here Paul Robeson in a address states that I'm a Negro. The origin of the Negro is African. It would therefore seem an easy matter for me to assume African nationality. In a different text, meanwhile, in my music, my plays, my films, this is the exact, it's the same text. So this is the last part of that text or poem or whatnot, or prose, says, I want to be African. That's the title of the prose. Meanwhile, in music, my plays, my films, I want to carry always this central idea to be African. Multitudes of men have died for less worthy ideals. It is even more eminently worth living for. Y'all can't see, but it's this little thing that's hovering over the slide, right? And Paul Robeson again says during an interview, and you can find the interview on YouTube. He's in Australia, and he says in the interview, I'm an American who is infinitely prouder to be of African descent. And I go into W.E. Du Bois talking about he's from Africa. I was trying to find. So yeah, I missed. It's probably in another slideshow because there was a group of um, people trying to say that African American wasn't being used prior to 1988 in what's his name? Jesse Jackson. That Jesse Jackson coined the term. I'm like, African American has been in use since the late 1700s. That's over 200 some odd years of continuous usage. Even and in most forms, they have shortened the African to Afro. And they'll say Afro American. Matter of fact, in Malcolm X's eulogy, they just the actor who did his eulogy, which was also in the Malcolm X movie, when at the end of the movie, he read it again for the Malcolm X movie. Calls Malcolm X an Afro American. And he died in what, 65 or 63? I think it was 65. Because King died in 68. Like, they're just they don't know how to do research. And it's just sad. And so it's like, after you've shown them all the evidence that you need, because I have more on organizations, newspapers called African American, Afro American, books written by folks, again, books written by folks, organizations, institutions, all the African American for over 250 years. But they can't provide any source material of them creating organizations and institutions where they name themselves whatever their so-called FBA, your proto FBA name is, that isn't associated with Africa at some point.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's sad. But hey, Sister Mika, what's on your mind?
No, I was just coming up. Yeah, I saw your presentation. I thought you did an excellent job. You need to do more, come live more often. I want to grace the stage with you. But
Hey man, these studies and everything else got me in the underground, in the dungeon, and whatever's going on in the world, I don't even know about.
I bet. But I'm just listening.
I'm trying to remember what. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, the guy that's on the stage, he been asking the questions, so I think you got his questions out. But yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sister Mika. I was the person that you said you'd give Asar my my information just in case, at the time, Asar had not put up a link, for anybody to be on the channel. So I wanted to thank you very much for wanting to do that in case I was not able to, voice my message publicly.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's not much. It's very easy, especially for us who are familiar with this subject, to easily debunk those things. But for some reason, and I've said this kind of stuff offline, but we also have to consider the education level and abilities of certain people, right? Like, it's, we had the slow classes for a reason, and unfortunately, everybody has access to the internet, and you know, everybody has the ability to voice their opinion. Y'all still hear me?
Yep, you can still be heard.
Okay. Oh man, I dropped my mic, and sometimes it'll disconnect. Matter of fact, let me take this off, and I'm gonna remove from studio, and I'm gonna share my screen. There you go. Are y'all still there? Let's see.
Yeah, I think you.
I can still hear you.
Okay. Y'all can see the screen, correct?
Right. Yep.
Yes. Ethnic
All
name of
right.
African Americans.
Yeah, so this is what I was reading earlier. So y'all saw that. But I just wanted to show some other ones with the African American on it. So African American, you saw that book, The Sermon of Castro Laura Cornwallis, and then African American Female Literary Association and the Intelligence Society. So there's the African American Society, which is referenced as a sponsor of Maria W. Stewart's public lecture of Franklin Hall, 1831, 1832, Afro American League, later called the National Afro American League, which you see right here. So that's 1887, 1890. And then you also have National Afro American Press, 1890. The Afro American, or just the Afro American, which is a newspaper in Baltimore. The National Federation of Afro American Women, 1895. National Afro American Council, 1898. Malcolm X being described as an Afro American, mentioned in the eulogy speech by actor Ossie Davis, and then the African American Historical and Genealogical Society up to the 1970s. So I was showing this continuous, you know, usage of African American in the name of our, you know, literature, the institutions that we created, et cetera, et cetera. So when these FBA folks try to say that we didn't use African American or Afro American prior to 1988, or we didn't use it as much, as we can see, it's been used continuously around the country since the 1700s. But they'll find a way to screw that up, right? But I wanted to speak on real quickly an example of, like, for example, the Bantu character, since Dr. Baruti mentioned the the Bantu nature of the culture. So of course y'all know, I've come up with all kinds of ideas, but they're all grounded in the African cultures from which we come from, which is, you know, documented, right? And so this is the name that I've suggested for African Americans, the Bayankole. With the word Nkole means an eminent or a powerful person, or it's also a name for God, right? And then our symbol would be the sun, but the sun using a spiral cosmogram that's deep rooted in Bantu culture in Central and Southern Africa, right? And we also find it in West Africa. So that's one of the criteria in which I set for myself, is to use signs and symbols and ideas that are inspired by common motifs and ideas across the cultures for which our direct ancestors came from, and then, you know, modify and make a new variant for us, right? And so it's interesting. So, you know, like, so when I say that this spiral you know, design of our sun symbol, you know, is rooted in Bantu culture, in West African culture, you can see in one of the Adinkras here. And also, I don't know if y'all familiar with a professor. She mainly writes in French, Dr. Clementine Faik Nzuji out of the Congo, right? And I took this screenshot of an interview on YouTube. So as you can see, it still has YouTube control images at the bottom and stuff here. And I wanted to capture what you see in the background. She's describing a Luba, a Chilu or Baluba, um, an ethnic group that exists in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a cosmogram. It's similar to the Bakongo cosmogram, of the, you know, a related ethnic group that Fukiao comes from, which exists in also in the Democratic Republic of Congo and parts of Angola, right? And so, you know, the spiral cosmograms, there's many different designs, right? But the same fundamental concept, you know, discussing the conception, birth, maturation, and death, and rebirth of living systems, ideas, people, etc. Right? And so this screenshot of the image is what you see in the back. So there was a point in the video where you can see the full image. She's describing and talking about what the image actually is and what it means. It's in French, so y'all, you know, got to listen in French. But this is the cosmogram. So you can see the cross and then the spiral going around it or whatnot, and so everything goes in the from left to right or counterclockwise. So that's why you see the arrow at the end going here. It starts another cycle, right? So keep this look in mind. So this is from this video right here. So now, when you read the text Africanisms in American Culture, there's a chapter here where they're talking about how one of our ancestors here in the United States was drawing these kind of hieroglyphs and spiral symbols, you know, these Dekinga cosmograms, representing the movement of the sun, et cetera, et cetera. And there's another text called Mojo Working. And as I was telling Dr. Winkler, this word mojo is the word moyo in Congo. And so mojo is a more of the West African form that you find like in Nigeria going west. And moyo or kimoyo is what you find more so in like the Democratic Republic of Congo. But Mojo Working, the author is Katrina Hazard Donald. The old African-American hoodoo system, a bold new reconsideration of hoodoo belief and practice. So she's talking about how, in parts of it, how much of what is hoodoo has Congo influence, right? And so she describes an article. Let me see. Right. So I'll just read this. She says, one Negro woman suffered pain in her side. And this is from a Moore or Ruby Andrews Moore in 1892 that this was recorded. And from an article called Superstitions from Georgia in a Journal of American Folktale. So pages 230 to 231. So Hazard Donald is citing this journal article from 1892. And so it says one Negro woman suffered pain in her side, which she firmly believed to be the work of a witch. To exercise the pain, when it grew severe, she went out into the yard, got on her knees in the sand, and making the following figure of as large dimensions as she could without moving, muttered words to herself that I could never find intelligible, indeed barely audible, and she would never enlighten me when I asked what she said. Below is the figure she made very slowly, with her eyes set and an intense expression on her face. When she had made a certain number of lines, the pain ceased. She said it appeared that the same number was not always requisite, right, in terms of the lines around. So this is the drawing, figure 4 in the text that she drew. So we know for a fact that she comes from the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then more than likely she's of the Luba culture, because this is the exact same symbol that you see here. And so when I'm drawing from Bantu languages and culture, I'm not doing it haphazardly, because this is our inheritance.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I saw where you used the term one time before, kimoyo, and you brought that up just a second ago. So I wasn't sure whether or not from that you had made some reference to that term as in something like maybe internal emotions. But as soon as you said kimoyo, I immediately looked at moyo as heart in Kiswahili. But maybe you can fill in any ideas from that. But what did you exactly mean by kimoyo? I've heard you say the term before.
Yes. So let me give a little background to why I entered it into this conversation, because I mentioned it in, so this very conversation that we're having now is an extension of a conversation that was had last night on a different platform. And in that platform, one of the other guests, we were kind of going back and forth on what is culture. And one of the things that I mentioned to him is that when you're talking about culture, you have to talk about in the inner logic of a people. And that inner logic and value system expresses itself in various ways, in terms of behaviors, in terms of attitudes, tastes, etc., and of course, cultural motifs. So part of the problem of the FBA and ADOS and everyone like them is that they think, either that we have nothing to do with Africa, or if there are some that believe that we are descended of Africans, they believe that we didn't retain any cultural aspects of who we are, and that we started from a clean slate. And what I was arguing is that is not the case. This stuff has already been documented. There was a big debate in this in academia on whether Africans lost all their culture and heritage. And so that's why the discussion about what is a culture is very important, because there are certain attitudes, ways of beings that are not erased, especially in the United States. See, what allowed us to keep the Africanisms is that white people didn't want us around them. So we weren't allowed to integrate into their society. So while they wouldn't let us openly practice stuff, we still practice stuff in the underground. We still held on to things in the underground. And we were able to do that because they isolated themselves from us. They put us into ghettos. So we're concentrated in areas where we're not integrated with white folks. And so part of that describing what is the essence of the African American personality, you have to understand what kimoyo is. And moyo, like in Kiswahili, the Luba has a more elaborate definition. And so it's a literal word for heart, but heart is used for spirit, soul, also intelligence, thought. It is used as a greeting. So they'll greet you, moyo. And vital force and vitality. That's the all-encompassing meaning in the Luba language. And so you would say Umoja in isiZulu, right? And but in like further north and going west, they say Mojo instead of Moyo, or they'll say Oyo, for the languages that drop the M, right? And so if you understand Kimoyo as a vital force exchange system, everything that we do is based on the intensity of the force involved in the phenomena. So from a younger person's perspective, like back in the day, like we would say stuff like um that movie or that party was off the chain. What do we mean by off the chain or off the meat rack? Because we have an underlying philosophy of everything being in balance and order. But every now and then there comes a vital force that shocks the system and disturbs it. So it can be done in a good way or it can be done in a bad way. So if something was off the chain popped off the bike chain, right? The bike chain popped off the rotating wheel thing, and it caused a disruption in the flow of movement of the bike. Off the meat rack is just, if you imagine meat hanging off of the rack in one of those big ice houses. We use any word, we use any situation to describe the ultimate disruption. Is like a shock or a voltage that was inserted into the experience. So it can be used for good or bad. Because if I say somebody was off the chain, that means that their behavior was not balanced. It was not kosher. Like it was disruptive. Right. And this is a moyo thing. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you had finished. I had a comment and a question, but please continue what you were saying.
No, I'll just in that portion there, but it's a vital force, it's a vitality situation. This is why like I made a statement not long ago saying that to be African is to be extra. Like why does when we teach it has to be lively? Why when we do music and dance it has to be very vibrant and exciting? Because our belief in Kimoyo. Now, we have the habits, but we no longer speak the language. So we always have to find words and phrases to describe what we back in the day called Kimoyo.
And there you're using Kimoyo as soul, right?
Yes. So when you say mojo, like in the blues, like in the old blues tracks in jazz, mojo is the word we use for soul and vital force and sexual energy. Even when you think of jazz, like the word jazz is an African word. It describes a party. That's what real jazz music is, just party music. In the United States, we attach that word to our party music, and it became a genre of music that kind of merged African rhythms with European classical instrumentation. But the word jazz itself is also the same word as jizz, right? Like a sexual
gyration.
Yeah. So like when you look up the earliest uses of jazz, they were almost synonymous. like a euphoric sexual experience, because that's what that's what the music made you feel, like you were being possessed, and you would move as all this vital force and creative force in the same way that in which you would experience if you had reached the climax during a sexual experience. So jazz and jizz are from the same root. When we say that the word, like if you go into the, like in you know, for my fraternity at the University of Houston, we used to throw something called the Park Jam. When jazz musicians have a jam session, jam is also an African word. Like, and if you understand kimoyo, you'll understand jazz, because it's a ritual experience where vital force energy is exchanged. This is why when we do shows, it has to be a back and forth. You understand hip hop, the back and forth cadence between the crowd and the MC. You know, white folks can go to a concert and just sit there and not interact with the performers. That's not how we do things. We can't do a lecture. You can't go to the Nation of Islam lecture without 4 or 5 people yelling and propping up the whoever's speaking. You can't go to any church service. You can't go to any one of our lectures and where our people are present and there's not an interaction of vital force exchange between the audience and the speaker and or performer. Because it's a kimoyo system, it's a kimoyo culture. And it's ironic, like people think soul music is like a separate genre of music or concept. People don't know that soul is the word that we use to describe jazz music. Real soul music is jazz. And the earliest of hip hop is just rapping over jazz. Earliest funk is just jazz. We have a habit of renaming stuff that already has a name and exists. Which is part of the confusion. Matter of fact, do I have something?
In fact,
sorry, go ahead.
May I make a comment or just a question to you?
Go ahead.
The comment that I had for you was, if you look in your studio chat, you'll see where I was asking you, were you familiar with a book called Congo Across the Water by, and I put Cooksey et al. It was like maybe about 3 or 4 of the authors other than the person Susan Cooksey. And it was a book about the tapestry of Congo culture, spelled with a K, Congo culture as tapestry throughout the United States, Haiti, Jamaica, Brazil, and other places in the so-called Western Hemisphere. So if you're not familiar with that book, please look that book up. It's a great book. There were a series.
I've seen it, but I haven't read it.
Okay, there were a series of scholars, I think, from the University of Florida that teamed up with some library researchers in Belgium, basically. And they looked at all aspects of Congo culture as it spread throughout the diaspora. One of the points that was made was about jazz again, and about Louis Armstrong visiting the Congo as a note and nod to the idea that the polyrhythms of jazz emanated from the Congo. So that was my comment. And my question also was on the spiral on the spiral that you had on the screen, and first part of it was that you showed the spiral somewhat that was drawn by the enslaved Bantu woman, and then prior to that you had a spiral that you showed that was circumferenced by some sun tips, and then you had, I think, a similar spiral without the sun tips. And I wanted to know, was the spiral that you had within the sun tips, was that your interpretation from the one that was done by the enslaved Bantu woman? You can explain that, and also, what did the exact spiral actually mean?
Okay. So the one with the sun, how should I say? Yeah, it's my interpretation. It is my unique creation and interpretation, because I'm in the context of creating an African American go culture, what I call a go culture. I'm like, you know, cultures usually have signs and symbols that represent them and their
Right.
values and ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we lack as African Americans. So as to get the process started in having an emblem, a kind of logo for African Americans, that's what I came up with and created, was that spiral sun. And I talk about our relationship to the sun. Matter of fact, let me switch back.
Now, I also saw a spiral without the sun tips somewhere in the pages or the sheets that you had. So I was wondering, was the
Yeah,
same
that
thing?
one is the Dinker symbol, and the spiral is moving in the opposite direction. So again, one of the things that I wanted to do was to make sure that there was some kind of commonality between thoughts and ideas across large areas in Africa. And so that it is, so I always want to ground what I'm creating in tradition and culture, and but give it a new flair, so that is unique and identical and identified with us. And so that other one that you saw was an Adinkra symbol of the sun that had a spiral in it. It didn't have an elaborate, let me see, was it the Brian Coley presents?
And while you're looking
Sorry.
for that, can you also say what the meaning of the spiral is? What does the spiral mean to you?
Well, I'm using it in the same way that is described in the text that you see right here. If you can see it, African Cosmology, the Bantu Congo, Principles of Life and Living by the late Dr. Kimbo Adinde Kia Bonseki Fukiao. And so this is my modified version of the Kinga symbol, in a spiral. So you'll see the spiral in many different forms. It's not just one or two forms. It's literally dozens upon dozens of variations that you can find in the Congo, right? And so it is representing cyclical time, and the conceptualization, this bottom part V1, to the birth stage of development V2, to the maturation stage V3, to the final stage of death and rebirth and doing the cycle all over again. So societies, living organisms, of course, human beings, even thought processes all go through this science. So these are supposed to be representations of the sun doing an apparent movement around the earth. So of course the sun rises in the east, which is why the birth is on this side, on the right hand side, and the sun sets on the left. Even when we do funerals and stuff now, it is sunrise, meaning birth, and then you'll see on the funeral program, sunset, the day of death or the year of death, right? And so that's still keeping within our Congo tradition. And
So
so
what?
this is the symbol that I talk about. I'm sorry.
So what does this mean for a people? Let me just give a
That's
thought
a
and then
it,
see if you would agree with this. So if you talk about cyclical time, with this
mhm.
in a practical sense for people connecting that symbol to themselves would mean that their origin and essence and culture is to be replenished from past eras, going through various processes, reappearing today, reappearing continually because we are constantly renewing ourselves. Would that be of any connection at all in terms of a practical idea?
It's all of that, and you really, because again, this is something that you have to read the literature, because it's so all encompassing in terms of ways in which they use it. So I can't say it's just used one way and to mean one thing.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I would
But it
encourage, if
can
you
mean
haven't got,
multiple things. It can mean multiple things if you were to put that out as something that you think that so-called African American people should want to use. It can mean multiple things. Would you be okay with that?
yes, but it still would have to be within the context of this notion of living sons. So that's what a human being is a living son
So,
that is uh that goes through different stages. And this is also, kind of a symbol of the community's purpose, because as I don't know if you've heard of a book called, by the same author, Fukiao, uh The Art of Babysitting.
yes, I actually have that. A small, very small book.
Yeah. And so in that text he talks about how the purpose of the community is to help the living son for his light to shine. And so that's what a culture is. So if you imagine a child as a son, a living son, then your job as an adult, as a family member, as a community, is to um, help that child's inner light to shine outward.
Yes, that
That's
that
exactly what
that
education.
yes. In fact, as soon as you said that, we can immediately connect that to Ubuntu. I am
Mhm,
because we are, and if you took the I as being the child or an individual person
mhm,
standing stronger because of the community as a foundation, we can connect those principles as well.
yep. And so here's another author, who knew Fukuyama as well, Dr. Barbaro Martinez Ruiz, and he has a text, Nailing Memory. Well, that's an article, but he has a text called Congo Graphic Writing and Other Narratives of the Sign, right? And so you'll find dozens upon dozens of variations of the Congo cosmogram. So that's what I'm saying. It's not one way, but you'll find commonly it's either going to be kind of a diamond cross shape in there, spirals, right? So these are like in where this one at the bottom, figure 5.5 or 55, I mean, you'll see these circles on the edges of this diamond, or tilted square, representing the sun in its different stages of movement, or apparent stages, because we know that the earth revolves around the sun. But from the standpoint of a human being on earth, it appears as this the sun rises on the right hand side and then sets on the left hand side, right? So that's what this is mean. But all of this is, exists in multiple ethnic groups, in the Bantu, Congo area, and you'll find many, many different signs. And so, he gives um, So for example, Dr. Martinez Ruiz says, for example, the Dikinga in figure 54, that's this one here with the spiral, from the Kuba people, shares these characteristics. The diamond center indicates God. So God as the center. And so you can see clearly now, if this is the center is God, then everything is emanating from God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's deep thought in it. And oversized cardinal points, although not triangular, form propellers and indicate collective motion toward the world of the ancestors. The dual spirals in the center of the diamond also demonstrate centripetal and centrifugal movement. Clementine, Faik, and Zuji, who we saw earlier in the conversation, explains the spiral, stating that coming up from the center from below conveys positive evolution, progress, and growth. And the coming into the center from outside indicates regression and fleeing, right? In Bantu Congo, excuse me, Fukuyama in his text, African Cosmology, the Bantu Congo, pages 132, 133, gives some insight into the cosmogram from the Bakongo people perspective, right? And so I've used this to as a symbol for Afrocentricity. So this is my logo for Afrocentricity, right? I used it in the as a emblem or a totem for African Americans, the Bayankole, right? In a different direction, but it's still the sun. So this is among the Akan, the tree. It is Owia. Owia is the word for sun. Kokako, greatness of the sun. The sun is the greatest source of energy on earth in day and night, or day in and day out. It shines on continually. The symbol encourages people to draw strength and vigor from the vitality of the sun, starting every new day with their sparkle renewed. Right. So even though they're not in the Congo, there's still some continuity and conceptualization that every person is a living sun, and so that we should draw uh, from the sun, which could be a symbol of the divine, that inner spark and renew our spark every day, our own light. And so this is how we can utilize African culture and our history. So I wanted to show that this is one of the reasons why I showed that that other diagram. Um, this is to show that I'm not just taking stuff from Africa. I'm showing you that this is what we brought here to the United States.
Right.
Right. So this is our inheritance. This is our heritage. We're what this is an act of Sankofa,
Mm-hmm.
going back and fetching what is ours.
Right.
Right.
And
And
if I
so
may, and
I'm
if I
sorry.
may say, the fact that you made a distinction about I'm not taking from Africa as though I were not connected, but
Mhm.
I am using the concept of Sankofa as in I'm looking back to the past to move into the future. I think is a powerful concept because we should always look upon Africa as a resource.
Mhm.
And I want to emphasize the term resource in what you were saying. I think that connects to people because they can always see something they see as a resource as something that helps them now and into the future, not just something in the past that is useless to their present living.
Exactly. And this is why I've added this into why I use the sun as our totem, because we've even in our creative expressions we've always in poetic fashion shown our relationship to the sun. So for example, there's a mix. These are all songs. So I could take a screenshot and go on YouTube and look up these songs and listen to them. So, for example, you have New Yorican Soul. I am the black gold of the sun. I especially recommend the Four Hero remix. Right. There's Victor Duplass, Morena remix. Victor Duplass again, neo soul singer out of Philly. I See the Sun. Fertile Ground, Black Sunshine. Fertile Ground again, Star People. Africa Oakland, Kissed by the Sun. Of course, the great jazz musician Sun Ra, Sun Song, and you got a whole bunch of Sun stuff, right? John Coltrane, Sun Ship. Old Dirty Bastards, Sons of Man, and Earth, Wind, and Fire, Shining Star. We have Dark Sun Riders, Dark Sun Riders. The group has a song called Dark Sun Riders. Stevie Wonder, A Place in the Sun. Nina Simone, Here Comes the Sun, as an honorable mention. We have Sun God and High Tech featuring Common. High Tech and Common are the artists. The song is called Sun God. I got this backwards here. And Harry Belafonte, Island in the Sun. Then we have Georgia Ann Muldrow, Child of the Sun. Like, so we've always, as African American artists, have been associating ourselves with the sun. So again, I'm not making up stuff. I'm just drawing from our history and our tradition, and just crystallizing it and institutionalizing that which we've already created. That's how you develop a culture. You take the best of what you are, and you institutionalize it. You systematize it. You crystallize it, and you create pedagogical processes to translate meanings and the signs and symbols and the values from one generation to the next.
And if I may,
But I wanted to go ahead.
If I may add, don't forget about Sun Goddess by Earth, Wind, and Fire, as sung on that particular tune by Ramsey Lewis, the pianist.
Yeah, there's so many more that we can add into that part of the conversation, but what I wanted to, before I forgot, remember when I was saying that soul is jazz?
Yes.
So there's a book by Emily J. Lordy, The Meaning of Soul, Black Music and Resilience Since the 1960s. And so this first chapter 1, From Soul to Post Soul, a literary and musical history. So Pete, what it says: before it came to denote a musical genre or to encompass a cultural logic, soul was most often used to describe a quality of jazz performance. In a pioneering 1961 article about the subgenre of soul jazz, Ebony writer and editor Lerone Bennett explained, soul, to be sure, is not even music, not even a music. It is the feeling with which an artist invests in his creation. The techniques for expressing that feeling were honed in the Black Baptist Church, which Baraka described as the wellspring of Black music. Here was the fount of which soul jazz artists like Horace Silver and Max Roach returned, in part to distinguish themselves from white cool jazz musicians. By rooting the soul jazz sensibility in the Black church, which Bennett coyly described as a never land from which white musicians are barred. Bennett and others frame soul as a technical and spiritual quality that white artists could not learn or appreciate. So it was used first to describe a quality of jazz, and then that term was used later to describe a genre of music, not necessarily about jazz itself. And like, people got to understand these particular histories, because even the word jazz is literal. It describes a kind of, what we would say in my time, a hype party, or what younger folks would say, a lit party. Like, that party was lit. That means everybody and everything was jumping in there. So that's what a jazz would be in terms of a party, a jazz party. But then that word became used to now describe a genre of music. And so it's almost like, it really is kind of like, if you say smooth jazz, is really kind of an oxymoron to say smooth jazz. But let me see. Yeah. So yeah, that was on. This was a lecture I did titled "Hip Hop as a Kimoyo Tradition," and I define Kimoyo as such: the art of adding life to life, of vitality and prosperity, of making things to flourish in all areas of life, the healing power of giving, the healing art of open-hearted sharing. Or in short, Kimoyo is a natural and social vital force exchange system that produces kininga. And its cognate in ancient Egyptian is ma'at. This is the underlying soul that bursts ma'at, that bursts culture. That's what Kimoyo is.
I wanted to ask you again regarding the word moyo again. Were you looking at the word moyo from the Congo language structures?
I always look at words from a family standpoint, not just one
Okay.
language. So, but the phrase Kimoyo comes from Kikongo.
Right.
And do I?
Okay. The reason that I mentioned that is because personally, I like the last definition that you gave for Kimoyo. If you could go back to those definitions that you flashed on the screen a second ago, it was the one about the art of open-hearted giving. And I'm gonna say why, if I may, whenever you flash that on again.
I'm sorry, I was trying to. I don't have it on this set of slides.
Oh,
But in
okay.
terms of the etymology of the term moyo.
Oh, there it is. Wait a minute, I think. Yeah, there is. There is. Okay. The reason that I like, not that I don't like the other definitions about the art of adding life to life and the healing power of giving, but I particularly like the healing art of open-hearted giving, sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because I always like the idea about connecting various things in simple ways. So, for example, if many people were to just read, okay, the word moyo in Kiswahili, means heart, then if you were to point out about Kimoyo, where I know you're looking at families of languages, but if you specifically, looked at Kikongo as a language, and you deduce this idea about the open-hearted sharing in some sort of way, then we make connections to people about how they simply are able to say, okay, I've heard of Kiswahili. Oh, okay, I can look up Moyo as being hard. Oh, okay, in Kikongo, there's a similar sort of meaning. So that once you see, okay, in Kikongo or another interpretation, the healing art of open-hearted sharing, that people connect up Kiswahili to Kikongo and say, okay, the word moyo in some base form is found amongst those languages, so that we began to get people to understand when we started talking about Bantu, about not only a whole family of language, but a whole family of cultural norms that are similar, stretching over many different areas of the continent, which also connects up to one of the slides that you showed, where you showed the predominant ethnic groups from which the African American population emanates from in different geographical parts of the continent. So this begins to, in simple ways, gets people to understand the richness of the culture, but its emanation is from diverse spots. And then when someone then talks about, from a Pan-African standpoint, about Kiswahili being adopted as a Pan-African language, they will have greater appreciation for that because they see its connection infused within other linguistic structures on the continent.
Yeah, I mean that's the again, when I was coming up with or looking to address the identity question for African Americans, I always approached it with an understanding that Africans genetically derive from various populations and speech communities in Africa, from West, Central, and Southeast Africa, meaning being the main corridors. And if I am to, because I'm always arguing with folks. I'm always looking at what possible arguments could they make against it. And if I was just to pick something from one group of people, then the argument would be, well, we're not those people. And we just can't take from them and just add it to us and say it's us. Well, that's not what I did. I looked at certain things and concepts that exist in a wide range of ethnic groups for which we actually descend from. And if I'm going to take a word to represent that idea, I may take it from a particular language, but here's that word in Kiswahili, here's it in Zulu, here's it in Isikosa, here it is in the Tree language, here it is in Wolof, here it is in Mande, here it is in ancient Egyptian. So that you know that the idea, the terms, although I'm taking it from a single place, is Pan-African in its distribution.
Right.
And so even the healing art of open-hearted sharing, that open-hearted sharing is the definition of what Ma'at is. And then the cognate for Ma'at in the Kikongo language is Kininga. And that's why I define it as a natural and social vital force exchange system that produces Ma'at, that produces a systematic way of relating and exchanging vital force. See, that's what people got to understand with the vital force component of it. Ma'at comes from a root that means to share food. This fundamental concept exists in the notion of Ubuntu. It's the sharing of food, it's the sharing of resources. You're sharing vital force energy to sustain another human being in your household or community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done with an open heart, not with malice, not with I'm expecting. Well, there is an expectation that if I'm in need, that if you have it, you would share with me. But it's done openly.
Yeah. With generosity.
With an open heart. Yeah. Generosity, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's the expectation. That's the culture and community from which we came from. So to keep this in the forefront of our minds, this is why it's defined as such, and why when I talk about African American underlying philosophy, it is because of Moyo. It is Kimoyo. And so now I gotta go, y'all. Yeah. I'm
go in,
trying not to make this a long show.
I'm loving it.
see. Right. So,
I wish you would come often.
I'm sorry.
I said I wish you go live more often because this is good. I got some topics too.
Uh, so, um, mm, so well, okay. So I'll just read this, and because I'm not trying to go long. So where I got the concept of kimoyo from is, oh, what did I do? Okay, from Fukiao again. And so what he's going to do is describe. I'm sorry, I'm making tea uh, at the same time. So if y'all hear any water pouring and steam, that's what I'm doing.
I can't help.
Uh, okay, so let me. I'm back. All right. So his PhD dissertation is called "Digging Up the Past: An Approach to Fundamental Education and Community Development," 1986. Right. And so in it, he's describing the cosmology and the fundamental principles that underlie the cosmology and philosophy of a Congo people. So he's saying and in their concept of God. So the Bantu concept of God is a principle of Kalunga, and this is also another cognate with the word Ma'at. Um, Therefore, wielded opposite forces, positive and negative. In one, and then let me read this correctly. So the Bantu concept of God is a principle of Kalunga, therefore welded opposite forces, positive and negative, into one. The Muntu himself is seen in terms of these paired forces. Inkwa Luzungu. He is a being of paired organic forces. Some are said Lumoso or Lukinto, left or female, and others Lunene or Labakala, right or male. Because all beings are resultant of the Kalunga, which we saw up here is the welded opposite forces, positive and negative, the complete forces made up of welded opposite forces of Kala and Luvimba, positive and negative in one. As a matter of fact, the whole of African religion, as one can see in their aspect among the Bantu people, have two key words beside in Zambi and Kalunga in terms of a reference for God. These words are Ngolo and Moyo. Force, and this is word for Ngolo. Ngolo means force, energy, or dynamism. And then Moyo means life and vitality. It is here that the African religions, in their aspect among the Bantu, find the roots of their dynamism in their wholeness. Instead of searching the sense and meaning of Bantu aspects of African religions on this clear basis, the Eurocentrist scholars found it not only important, but imperative for their imperialistic intentions to label Bantu religion on the ground of a very negative basis. Yet, this basis does not have tracks in the Bantu languages. They labeled these people animists in their religion animism. The word itself, related to anima, animal, sees clearly what these scholars had in mind African religion in general and about its aspects among the Bantu people in particular. The Bantu religion is not animism or animalism. Neither are the Bantu animists nor animalists. The Bantu people are vitalists. This is accepting themselves as well as everything in the universe as part of Nkingu Amoyo, the principle of life in its wholeness. Their religion deals principally with force and vitality. Um, in Fukuyama, in his text Self-Healing Power and Therapy, Moyo, according to ancient schools of Africa, means vital power. Moyo is what is vitally is the vitality of life. It is the key word to Kibantu, the Bantu way of life. Their philosophy, Kimoyo vitalism, is their religion, and it is not animism. And so, this is why our churches are different here in America, and why it has to be jumping, because our religion is Kimoyo. It's about vitality and the exchange of vital force, right? And so I gave some definitions. So like Chiluba Moyo, heart, life, spirit, soul, courage, will, design, inclination, feeling, mood, thought, greeting, and hello. In Isizulu, Umoja, air, spirit, soul, wind, breath. Asante Tui, Mogia, blood. In Chiluba, this form is cognate with Mungi, heart. So it's a doublet in the language in Chiluba. We have Mungi, which is heart, and we have Moyo, which is heart. But they all derive from the same root, right?
Right.
And so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. See, like on that previous screen right there, like, for example, if many people are also looking at that, let's say the word Moyo again was added, just Moyo, and it was put down that was Kikongo, and you also put, vitality, and then Kiswahili, Moyo, and that's put as heart, then that again, gives people in a simple way to understand the essence of the construction of the word and its variations coming through various languages. And in fact, it's great that even though we could put the Kiswahili word down, Moyo, of course, to say heart, but if we said, okay, Kiswahili is an overarching language that connects up various languages from across the continent, synthesized linguistically, that's one idea. But if we look at Chiluba, and say, okay, well, that's specifically Central Africa, if people want to say. And then they look at isiZulu, and they say Umoja, and say, oh, that's Central, Southern Africa. And then they say, oh, Twi, oh, okay, wow, that's West Africa. And then again, the other word for Chiluba, again, Central Africa. And then, of course, Kikongo, Central Africa. Then people can say, wow, this variation of the word Moyo or Mwoyo is connected all over the continent, still giving people the idea that these different kind of words come from the same origin, but they emanate all over the continent, still connecting in people's minds about Pan-Africanism, not just focusing on one particular area, but looking at the continent in macro as a resource. And then coming back to your earlier point about the African American people being people who are descended from a combination of people who are in various parts of the continent, still reinforcing what Kwanzaa is supposed to do, what Ubuntu is, and all these concepts, so that people keep getting the mix and the synergy of all these things together as they understand the identity of who they are, that they might not understand, but will understand later as they progress mentally.
Indeed. And again, that was a conscious decision, and it had all of that in mind. And I just wanted to read this lastly, continuing from Foucault's dissertation, where he goes in more in depth on this concept. So, a religion that does not believe in any, talking about Bantu religion, is a religion that does not believe in any physical being, but in Ngolo Ye Moyo, Mudingo Dingo, force and life through Dingo Dingo, the natural way of life and change. This religion can be called dynamo vitalism or Kimoyo. The religion itself is not a question of belief. It is a question of Tadingo Dingo, Ye Kalamu Dingo Dingo. Participating in Dingo Dingo, and Dingo Dingo means change, and being part of the change or exchange. right? The Muntu sees his religion like dancing. Dancing is not a question of belief, it is a question of participating and of being part of the dance. This is why every Muntu, therefore African, dances exactly in the same manner. He taught his Ngolo and Moyo, the key words of his religion of force and vitality, into which in Zombie, God is not a physical being or a male or female gender, but a Kalunga, the principle of opposite welded forces in one, a principle that one cannot understand because inseparable with matter only in being part of the motion through the dingo dingo itself. So if you understand Kimoy, because a key, like there's kind of a merging of two different prefixes. So there's a key, like in Kiswahili, that means mouth or language, right? But there's also a key that means kind of like the art or the manner or the way of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say kimoyo, it is the art of dynamo vitalism. It's an exchange, a dance, a back and forth of vital force. And everything that we do has to include Ngolo and Moyo,
Mm-hmm.
which is dynamism and vitality. That's why when in our celebrations and everything that we do, like white folks and others think we're kind of loud or too energetic. Matter of fact, one of the reasons, and which is crazy because we invented it, but white people adopted square dancing in to be anti African American, because they were claiming that our dancing was too energetic, dynamic, and sexually oriented. So not knowing that we invented square dancing, they adopted square dancing to not be associated with the so-called sexual vitality, because they always claim that we're over sexualized, not understanding that there's y'all that's sexualizing us. This is just us acting hype, because that's the way that our music moves us, right? And so this was remember that Elvis was just copying black artists, original black blues and rock artists. But one of his
and gospel
critiques,
too.
yes, and one of his critiques is that he was too sexual, so to speak. But he's copying black aesthetics, but not understanding this notion of kimoyo, because everything we do has to have a vital, it has to be dynamic and be exciting in a real sense. And that's what scares Europeans in terms of our level of vitality in what we do. And so if we understand that, then we can understand the nature of hip hop and why hip hop was so disruptive. It's just kimoyo in action. And when we dance and when we crump and why we doing all these, acrobatic jerking movements in our dance, we're not waltzing and just prancing and, just calm and sliding. We're jumping and we're flipping and our chests are popping and et cetera, et cetera. We can't have a church sermon without it being a performance of dynamic energy and the like. We can't even argue with Negroes on the corner without some vital energy and force.
Even though that you in the picture? Is that you in the picture?
No.
Yo, we still looking for the pictures.
I'm sorry.
No, he asked was that.
Say, Mika?
Yeah, I said we still looking for you in the pictures. We still looking for the picture of you.
Yeah. See, when I was a Hebrew Israelite, this was before this creation of this group. This group didn't exist when I was a Hebrew Israelite. So there's a lot of splinter groups that exist now that I stopped keeping up with them in the 90s. So you know, and this is hip. So we can't even go to ballet and keep ballet like white folks keep it. We have to invent stuff like hiplet. This is hip hop ballet or hip play.
We're talented, man. Talented.
It's spirit in everything. That's the nature of our belief, right? And so I don't want to go on this because I've done this lecture already. But and so when that word kaninga is the word for balance, and there's a variant of it lunga, meaning balance and health. Another variant of Ma'at. See, Ma'at is several different words. We just kind of lump everything into one meeting. But yeah, I'll end there. Because it's already past.
Your bedtime.
Yeah, because I gotta wake up at 4 a.m. So
Well, oh,
I'm about to prepare and lay it down. So so I've been on farther than I need to be. But
well, thank you for your time today, Asar. I wanted to see when I could talk with you offline. Just maybe need a few 15 minutes or so whenever you get a chance. But the email that I sent to you over about a month and a half ago, I can resend it. If I can tell you the email that I used, can I tell you the email that I used?
yeah, I mean, just let me know.
I mean,
Just resend it.
I
I'm
can
pretty
resend
sure
it
it's in there,
now.
but
I can resend it
yeah, because I
now,
don't.
but I didn't know if I can say on air the email that I used.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Okay, all right.
Just
Can you put
hold on.
in the studio chat the exact email that I should send it to? Because I'll re-forward it. But I wanted to talk to you. If you have a chance, maybe tomorrow I could, we could work out the time and.
Yeah, we can schedule time. What time will I get in?
Okay.
I probably won't get in until around 6.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
probably like 6:30.
Yes, that's fine. I'm gonna look at this email again. It's the same one that I used.
maybe Asar need to check his email unless when it's a.
That's what I'm saying. I don't check my emails because I don't.
Yeah,
I mean, I have them, but because I'm doing other stuff. Like nobody contacts me, and unless I've run into them somewhere and they tell me that they try to contact me, then I'll do what I do just now.
You need an assistant.
Okay.
I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm sending it to you now. I don't know if you can just check your email and see if you get it right now. It's a re-forwarding.
Is under your same name?
Yeah, I just got to remember my password.
Oh Lord.
Okay. Yeah, I got a gang. Yeah, I ain't got time to go through all these emails. But yeah, I see this last one. Forward asarimhotep interest in participating, and then it cuts off.
Yes. Okay. Right. Okay.
So yeah, I'll read that by tomorrow. And
Okay. And
that's
I
what
have
the
my email, of course, and my WhatsApp number. I think I have your regular phone number, unless it's changed. But I would like to talk to you very urgently about your and support really of your efforts about the African name for African Americans.
Yeah, if we schedule a time 6:30 tomorrow, that should be good. I can spare at least 30 minutes.
Okay. All right. That's fine. If you will send me a reply and just put your whatever the phone number is, I think I have your phone number. I've left a message there too, but I'm not even sure if you got it. And I'm glad to talk with you. So just send me a message just saying what your number is again.
All righty. Yeah, I did. And, I keep my phone off. So if, unless a message was left, that's why you got to kind of schedule it. Like if I schedule it, like we have a time, then I'll know to be by the phone. I don't use this phone for anything.
Right. And what I figured was, that you have, become such a big star and, international presence.
I wish.
It'll just be very difficult to get, in touch with you. So, No,
it's not that. It's just I have all these chapters to read. And so I don't have time to talk. So that's why, like as she said, we need to do, like, I haven't done any shows, in a while. Like I've recently, the only reason why I've done like a few shows this week is because I had a break, but now I got to go back to work in the morning, so.
Okay. And Sister Mika, it's good meeting you as well. I thought that, you were probably a SARS publicist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel,
I'm working, but yeah. But yeah, it was nice meeting you too.
All right, very good. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Well, I thank everyone who is participating and stayed with us this long, and it went over the time that I intended, but hopefully the original series of slides and then the subsequent conversation has added something to your toolbox, and that you'll take it and then expand on it, and we'll continue these conversations in the future. When, I cannot tell you, because I'm going back into hermit status. But until then, y'all have a good night, and Happy New Year's to each and every one of you. Hotep.
This program was created with the love and support of all of our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.